Ashveo ish, asher holach batzas rishoyim, uv'derech hatoim lo amod, uv'moshav leitzim lo yoshav, ki im b'saras Adonai chavtzo, uv'saraso yege yomam v'loyla. V'hoyo k'etz shosul al palgei ma'oyim, asher priyo yitain b'ito, v'yoleu lo yiboil, v'chol asher yaseh yatzliach, lo chen harishoyim, כי אם כמוץ אשר תדפן רוח, על כן לא יקומו רשעים במשפט, וחטאים בדס צדיקים, כי ידע אדוני דרך צדיקים, ודרך רשעים תאבד.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binos desha yarbitzeini, amei menuchos hinaleini, nafshi yishovev, yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech begeitz hamaves, lo irara ki ata imadi, shiftecho mishantecha, heima yinachamuni, taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorirai, Dishanta v'Hashemen roshi kosi rivaya, ach tov v'chesed yurdifuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veis Adonai liorech yamim. A song of David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. God causes me to lie down in lush pastures. God leads me beside tranquil waters. God restores my soul and guides me in righteous paths for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your scepter and staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my adversaries. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for length of days.
like to begin by thanking everybody who's here today, and thank you all for the outpouring of support from the community. In particular, I would like to thank Rabbi Breidowitz and Rabbi Koropkin and Rabbi Spitz, who are officiating. A particular thank you also to Rabbi and Rebbekin Carfunkel of the Forestville Jewish Community Center on Spadina for welcoming Esther and I so graciously and generously over the past few months as we spent Shabbat and Yom Tov in their shul while we studied with my mother. I would also especially like to thank Virginia, my mother's loyal and devoted caregiver who has lovingly attended to my mother's every need these past 12 years, far, far exceeding our expectations. She was sort of like a daughter. She called her Nana, but I think she felt like Mom. My mother was a very elegant, ladylike woman. She was never flashy or showy. Her deportment was of great modesty. She had tremendous taste in design, clothing, and jewelry. My father was an accomplished jewelry designer and manufacturer, and he lovingly created personal jewelry for her to wear, which she treasured. In addition, she was a very determined woman with great resiliency. She developed this trait as a young girl. As the rabbi mentioned, my grandfather often had to be absent from the family home in Toronto and work up north. And my grandmother, my bubi Chana, relied on Henka, my mother, when something needed to be done. So if she had to stay home with my younger people at home, she would know that she could always count on my mother, and she would say, Henka can, when there was something who could do this. Henka can. So that was my mother's sort of modus operandi. She sort of grew up with that kind of model of behavior, that if there was something to be done, she did it, and she taught that, I guess, through her example to my sister and myself, that any goal that we had, anything we had to do, she would just tell us that we can do it. If we expressed any doubt about our abilities to do such a thing or a goal, she would tell us to say, I can do it, I am fine, I can do it. She was a very positive person in that way, and she encouraged us to keep our head high and maintain our self-respect, but always to do so with a sense of humility, which was rooted in her basic Jewish value system. She was very devoted to the family. The family was everything to her. The kids will speak more of this, I think, later. She was not a Torah scholar, but she was very much aware and proud of her Jewish identity. She was very God-fearing, and she was very proud of the Jewish people and being a member of the Jewish people. She used to always say things like, please God, we should only all be well. This was commonly on her lips. And thank God for all the little bits. All the little bits. She would say, thank God for all the little bits. My wife would say, a lot of those are big bits you're thanking her for, but that was her expression. And she always prayed, she said, just have a little more time to be able to enjoy the children, the grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren. That was her fervent prayer. But she was, as I said, she was no Torah scholar, but she was maybe, you might call a life scholar. She couldn't really appreciate sometimes my journey to increased religious observance. And sometimes when she saw me doing something, she would say, Bob, you're not a rabbi. And then by extension, she would focus on my son, Avi, and she'd say, Avila, you're not a rabbi. Well, then Avi became a rabbi. But she was very proud. She loved life, and she was engaged to the fullest in life. She wasn't a dreamer. She was more of a doer. And the love of life permeated everything she did, and that charming spirit of hers touched those around her. My mother turned 101 this past August, and some people may think that when a person, you lose a loved one when they're very old and you can say they've had a good long life, though maybe it would be easier to let them go upon their passing. And of course that is true in some respects. But in a way, it's also just the opposite, because you've had more time to love them. You've had more time to appreciate them and to value them. So the loss is all the greater. You know, she would call me every night. Some of you know this. She would call me every night at my office about 10 o'clock. And she'd say, are you still there? Bob, get the tra-la-la. That was her favorite expressions. And sometimes the patients would be looking at me talking, and they hear her, and they say, "Who was that?" I say, "My mother." So then she said, "Go home, Bob, get into bed, stretch out, get a good night's sleep so you can wake up the next morning refreshed and ready to face another day." It reminded me of one time when she was already in her 90s, and she had an unusual, she had an appendicitis. And that's not very common for people in their 90s, but she had it. And in the recovery unit called the step-down unit, it's almost like an ICU sort of, not quite. In the step-down surgical unit in the hospital, shortly after the surgery, we were all quite worried about her. She was a frail 90-year-old having major surgery. So anyway, we were worried, and we thought maybe this is it. So as I turned around to leave for home, I heard her say, "Bob, fix your collar." I said, "Baruch Hashem, she's back." I'm grateful to God to have had such an ally. She was so totally devoted, and this was such a great gift. So as I said, Henke learned in her early years that Henke can, and all through her life Henke did. And if Henke can, then we can too. She showed us how we can live as a proud Jewish person with dignity and self-respect, and how we can do chesed, kindness, to others. Henke can, and Henke did. Henke can, and Henke did. I love you, Mom.
I'm Joyce Feinberg, Helen's daughter. I would like to share with you today just a few thoughts about my mom, and to say I wish everyone could have had such a kind, thoughtful, loving, and caring mom as Bob and I have had. We are so grateful to have benefited from her mothering for such an incredibly long time, especially knowing that she lost her own mother, our Bubi Chana, when Mom was just a young new mother. Maybe some of her inner strength came from the urge to be there for us for as long as she could. As I think back to stories she told about her childhood, I realize that she was the middle child in a family of 3, yet never complained about that role. Instead, she was glad to sometimes be given important tasks with her parents' expectations that, I'm going to repeat you, Henke can do it. As a little girl, she was known to be something of a chatterbox, although that gave way to gracious and quiet elegance as an adult. Her many aesthetic and administrative talents enabled her to be supportive to family as well as to various charitable organizations, especially her chapter of Hadassah Wizo. I'm grateful to Mom for so many things, but especially for her example of how to be a good Jewish mother, of placing Bob and me at the center of her life and focus, for worrying about our problems, whether large or small, for saying all the motherly things that may have bounced off us at the time but linger with us now. Eat your vegetables, drink your milk, go to bed early, practice the piano. And more recently, don't work too hard, sleep well, and wake up refreshed. And I love you very, very, very much. I'm grateful also that she found such a lovely and loving man to be her husband and thus our dear father. Both of them so kind and gentle. We appreciate so much the warmth and support of family and friends who have gathered here today, and of those who have sent warm messages. Thank you to my husband, Stephen, who came with me to visit Mom last weekend and again yesterday despite his own health challenges. How grateful we are for the presence of our sons, Anthony and Howard, who traveled great distances to be here today. Thank you to my Libman nieces and nephew for their ongoing support of Nana all through their lives, lucky as they were to have her in their hometown as they were growing up. I know how much she loved to be around them. And dear Esther, the perfect daughter-in-law, always including Mom in their family activities, so much so that many of Bob and Esther's friends considered Mom to be their Nana as well. One of Mom's greatest pleasures in recent years was shopping for gifts, especially clothes, for all 14 of her great-grandchildren. Even though she was exhausted most of the time, she would be eager to get up and go shopping with Virginia, and then to see how much the children loved what she had chosen for them. We were indeed fortunate to have in Virginia the help of an incredibly devoted caregiver whom many of you know. No one could ask for a more devoted friend and helper. As an American now, I cannot help but be impressed by the amazing support provided in Canada to Mom in her final weeks by the CCAC, including the home health program run by Dr. Mark Novichinsky. To my knowledge, there is nothing like this in the U.S. So we are very sad that Mom's life has come to an end, but we are so grateful for all that her life has meant for so many of us.
Nana, my children probably didn't know her first name, was actually an Olympic hero. Most of you don't know that. She was an Olympic hero because she invented new games. She won, obviously, gold in each of those games, and those games were in the sports of character, of standards, and of values, in addition to her stamina. Let me tell you a quick story. This August, we came to Toronto with my kids to visit, and she had a little incident, but, Nana's had many incidents over the years, and most of these incidents would be a real serious impediment for most people, but she was much older. And she got to the emergency room, and the doctor said, well, they take a look. I'm not sure if it's looking so good. And I said, he doesn't know Nana. So what did she say? She said, tell him to hurry up, because I have a hairdresser appointment. So character, standards, and values. Nana was all about family. It's been mentioned before. Family was not just blood family, it was extended family. Some of the extended family is here. Some of the extended family is on connected via phones and internet and so forth. And she didn't distinguish between either. Right? It was family that counted. And that spirit of family will carry on. And it's the reason why, as a family and with our cousins, we didn't grow up or live in the same city throughout our lives. But that doesn't stop us from having lunch in New York, or sitting in a park in Jerusalem, or just spending good time together. And family was so important, we just have to make sure that we continue that standard of family. And it's so important to her, and that's what I remember from every time we spoke on the phone, every Friday afternoon, just after the hairdresser. She wanted to know about the family. That's all that mattered to her. And that's why she continued to fight through 112 years on this earth, and of course many more beyond.
It never occurred to me that I might be up here one day talking about Nana instead of with her. If it was naive of me to think that she was invincible, it was at least understandable, considering everything she lived through and what an impact she had on everyone she knew. Nana might have been a small woman, but she had this quiet strength you could feel the moment she stepped into a room. Anyone who met her and thought they were dealing with a little old lady was set straight shortly thereafter. She would do this by whisper shouting, but really just shouting, "What's taking so long?" or "Get the show on the road." But that is not to say that she wasn't gracious to others. Nana was a tremendous person to have in your corner, not because she would tell you what you wanted to hear, but because she would say or do exactly what was needed to get you through your struggles. I wish I knew what Nana would say to us to get us through the grief we are feeling right now. I'm sure she would appreciate all of us here together, because that's what she loved most, having the whole family be together. I want to tell you about the special moment my Nana and I shared together, just the two of us. Every time I would come in to visit, we would go out to Omni for lunch, her second home, my parents being the third. And right after lunch, she would say, "So Mir, time to go to Joe Fresh." And we would drive a little further south to her favorite clothing store, and she would pick out things for me to try on. I would come out of the changing room, and she'd be sitting there waiting to give me her critique or to tell me she loved it. She was my all-time favorite shopping partner. No nonsense. And now, most of my closet is full of Joe Fresh. What was most important to Nana was hearing from her children and grandchildren. The excitement on the phone every time I called her before Shabbos was something I'll always remember. She would say, "Hello, my sweet pigeon," and then would often ask me how I'm liking my job or what's going on in my life at the moment. And at the end of every phone call, she would always ask me when I'm coming to Toronto next, and it was never soon enough, even if I had just come back from a trip. Before I conclude, I want to add a few words for my older siblings, Chana, Avi, and Dvorah, who are not able to arrive in time from Israel. Chana noted Nana's generosity to Chana's children, Nana's great-grandchildren, making each feel so important. They all send their love and tears and wish with all their hearts they could be with us right now. Dvorah recalls many childhood memories of spending time at Nana's apartment, where every wall was covered with pictures of every member of the family. She mentioned how it will be difficult to fathom not returning to her apartment, a place where all of us felt so at home. Avi mentioned a story from about 10 years ago when she was hospitalized with appendicitis. The physician pressured her to sign a DNR, do not resuscitate. Nana told Avi she adamantly refused. She told him that she had too much to live for and wanted to see all her grandchildren get married. She wanted to continue to buy us sweaters, pajamas, and spring jackets. Within those 10 years, she walked down the aisle at all of our weddings and was soon blessed to be able to buy her great-grandchildren little sweaters, little pajamas, and little spring jackets. Life will be hard going on without the matriarch of our family. So many things will continue to remind me of Nana long after today. Every Toronto visit will be missing something without Nana arriving to the house on Shabbos with an assortment of fruit, and I will certainly miss those weekly phone calls with her mentioning all the reasons why I should move back to Toronto. I feel blessed that I had so many opportunities to spend time with Nana before she passed, and to hopefully carry on so many of her loving attributes for the rest of my life.
The benefit of batting cleanup is I felt comfortable not writing anything down. Actually, just a thought now of Torah study from last weekend. We just got into probably a half-hour debate about the actual ages of the patriarchs and matriarchs in the Torah, and got into some fights about what you could actually pin down. Was that 126? Are we talking about 135? We started fighting about the math. It didn't add up. I still don't understand what 112 years means, but 101, I know what that means. It means that we were very spoiled. I always knew that my Nana spoiled us, but she spoiled us with her love. She was a fierce protector of her family. She fiercely loved her family. And I know that the brightest moments on any day for her were when we were there, when she talked to us, when she saw us. When my daughter Sophie came, there was a special smile that even I don't recall ever seeing when I was a kid. But that's the thing, when you have great-grandkids, and when you have a lot of great-grandkids, it can bring a lot of joy and keep you going a lot longer than you would expect. So I'm grateful for every one of those years and every one of them that I was a part of.